Today, I bring you a charming new mystery featuring none other than the brilliant Hercule Poirot, the world's most famous Belgian detective, created by Agatha Christie. This case is filled with twists, clever clues, and Poirot's signature little grey cells at work. Make yourself comfortable, and let's unravel this elegant puzzle together. And if you'd like, leave a quick comment and tell me where you're joining from. It's always a pleasure to know where our little detective community is tuning in from. Now let's get started. It was one of those rare London mornings where the city itself seemed to pause in admiration of its own elegance. The sun filtered softly through the high windows of our apartment on Whitehaven Mansions, and Hercule Poirot, resplendent in a dressing gown of astonishing burgundy silk, stood before the mirror with a concentration that might have moved a sculptor to tears. I, Captain Arthur Hastings, sat contentedly in the armchair with a cup of strong Darjeeling and the morning papers spread across my lap. It was the society pages, as it often was when nothing had yet exploded or been stolen or stabbed, and I read aloud now for Poirot's casual amusement. The wedding of the season is set to take place today at St. George's Chapel. I began, pausing for effect, as Lady Charlotte Morecombe, heiress to the Morecombe estate and fortune, is due to marry Lord Edmund Shelbrooke, noted society figure and financier. Quite the pairing, eh, Poirot? Poirot murmured, not looking up from the meticulous grooming of his moustache. Love, I think not. Alliance? Perhaps. But let us not be cynical, eh, mon ami? Well, from what I gather, I continued, she's quite the modern woman, educated at Cheltenham, something of a reformist and a great beauty, apparently. Poirot finally turned from the mirror, the tips of his moustache glistening. And what of the young man, this Shelbrooke? Is he also a reformer? Rather more traditional, I believe, and frightfully rich. Ah, said Poirot, steepling his fingers. In England, it is very fashionable for fortunes to marry fortunes. It is, how shall we say, romantic by arrangement. We chuckled. It all seemed delightfully removed from the world of crime and mystery. But then again, when one is in the company of Hercule Poirot, tranquility never lingers long. I had barely begun my second cup of tea when the calm of the morning was rudely interrupted by a sharp rapping at the door. Poirot arched an eyebrow. We are not expecting callers, are we, Hastings? No, I said, setting my cup aside and heading to answer it. Standing in the doorway was a young man, slightly breathless, pale as parchment, and unmistakably high-born. He looked like a man who had been running, not just physically, but emotionally. I must speak with Monsieur Poirot, he stammered. It's about Charlotte. She's vanished. Poirot, already rising from his seat, crossed the room in 2 elegant steps. Please come in. You are Lord Edmund Shelbrooke, n'est-ce pas? The young man nodded, swallowing hard. Yes. But, how did you… Come, sit. Hastings, be so good as to bring the gentleman some water. Now, begin at the beginning. I don't know what to say, Shelbrooke gasped. Everything was ready. The guests had arrived. Charlotte went to her dressing room with her maid. And then, nothing. She was gone. Disappeared. No note, no struggle. No one saw a thing. She simply vanished. Poirot's expression changed not an inch. The bride who was there, and then gone, he mused softly. An empty room before a crowded chapel. Très dramatique. And the scandal. It will destroy her, her family. Me. That's why I came to you. You must help. I glanced at Poirot. He was silent for a moment, eyes narrowing. Then, quietly, he said, This, Hastings, is no ordinary elopement. There is more to this than meets the eye. Lord Edmund Shelbrooke was not the sort of man I would have expected to unravel so quickly. Tall, impeccably dressed, even in distress, and with the chiseled composure of his aristocratic breed, he still gave off the air of someone who'd always had things go his way. Until today. "I swear to you," he said, gripping his glass of water with trembling fingers, "Charlotte would never have left of her own accord. She was nervous, yes. What bride isn't? But she was ready. I saw her just 10 minutes before the ceremony." "She was alone?" Poirot asked, leaning forward. "With her maid, Alice. She was fastening the veil, or something like that." "Ah, and this Alice, what does she say?" "She said Charlotte was calm, serene even. Then she stepped out of the room to fetch a hairpin, and when she returned, Charlotte was gone." "Did she leave by the window?" "Number It's on the second floor. No sign of anything disturbed." Poirot pursed his lips. "And the belongings of the mademoiselle? Were they untouched?" "Yes. Her purse, her gloves, even her bouquet, all left behind." Poirot folded his hands. "And no message? No note?" Shelbrooke shook his head. "Nothing." "Lord Shelbrooke," Poirot said gently, "forgive me, but was there any quarrel? Any, how do you say, discontent between you and Lady Charlotte?" The young man flushed. "None whatsoever. We were in love." Poirot inclined his head ever so slightly, his eyes unreadable. "Yes, of course." As Shelbrooke sat back, visibly struggling to maintain his composure, I caught a glimmer in Poirot's eyes. It was not pity, nor concern. It was interest. "Come, Hastings," he said, rising suddenly. "We must pay a visit to this charming estate. A bride has disappeared. And that, mon ami, is not merely a matter for the heart. It is a matter for the little grey cells." Lord Edmund's voice trembled as he recounted the moments that led up to the extraordinary disappearance. "After the maid returned and found Charlotte gone, a search began immediately," he said, running a hand through his already dishevelled hair. "The bridesmaids, the household staff, everyone was alerted. We thought perhaps she had simply gone for air. You know, nerves. But when 10 minutes passed, then 15, panic set in." Poirot nodded, fingers tented, gaze fixed on the young man. "No one saw her leave?" he asked quietly. The dressing room is on the second floor overlooking the rear gardens. The window was locked from the inside, and the corridor outside was never left unattended, not with guests and staff bustling about. We asked everyone. No one saw her come down the stairs, no carriages were taken, nothing." "And the room itself?" "Untouched," said Edmund. "Charlotte's veil lay carefully folded on the chair. Her gloves, her bouquet, even her shoes, still beside the chaise. It's as if she evaporated." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Ah non, my lord, no one evaporates. Even the cleverest disappearance leaves a ripple." I scribbled notes as Poirot continued his questions. Had anyone new joined the staff recently? Had there been any unusual letters, arguments, or disturbances? Edmund insisted there had been none. "She was calm that morning, I swear it. Serene. Happy even." "Sometimes," murmured Poirot, "serenity can be a mask. And happiness, that is the greatest illusion of all." I looked up from my notebook. "Do you think she ran away, Poirot?" Poirot gave me one of his enigmatic smiles. "My dear Hastings, one must not jump to conclusions. We do not yet know if Mademoiselle Charlotte ran, was taken, or planned something far more interesting." Once Lord Edmund had departed, though not without a flurry of gratitude and a promise to wire travel arrangements for our visit to the estate, I watched Poirot pace the room with increasing intensity. There was a certain ritual to it, one I had witnessed many times. The fussing with his cuffs, the smoothing of his moustache, the occasional pause to stare into space as though the wallpaper might reveal the secrets of the universe. I sat back with my tea. "Well, my dear Poirot, what do you make of it all?" He stopped mid-step, turned slowly toward me and tapped a finger to his temple. It is most curious, Hastings. Most curious indeed. A bride vanishes on her wedding day, with no witnesses, no apparent motive, and no means of escape. It has the air of drama, but the detail of calculation. You think it was planned? I asked. I think, Poirot said, seating himself with great dignity, that the situation is too perfect. The untouched belongings, the silent room, the timing, just before the ceremony. It has the flair of a stage magician. Voilà, the bride, disparaît. But to what end? Poirot leaned forward. Ah, that is the question, mon ami. Was it an escape from something? Or from someone? Or, perhaps, it was not escape at all, but exposure. A statement. A statement. Poirot's eyes sparkled. Yes, Mademoiselle Charlotte Morecombe, from what you read, is no ordinary heiress. Intelligent, modern, principled. She does not strike me as the type to flee in cowardice. Non. If she has disappeared, I believe it is with purpose. I shook my head. Still seems like madness to me. Poirot chuckled softly. And yet, madness often wears the mask of genius. Come, Hastings, we must prepare ourselves. This is no ordinary elopement, no trivial scandal. The truth, I suspect, lies buried among silks, secrets, and shadows. And with that, the great man rose, brushing a speck of dust from his lapel. Pack your bags, mon ami. We go to the countryside, to a wedding without a bride, and to a house where silence may speak louder than the vows never spoken. We arrived at Morecombe Manor in the soft light of early afternoon, the countryside bathed in the kind of pale English sunshine that promises warmth but delivers only wind. The estate itself was as grand as expected, a broad, symmetrical facade of honeyed stone, framed by neatly trimmed hedges and the sort of gravel drive that crunches with aristocratic precision underfoot. Poirot, naturally, had dressed for the occasion. A grey suit with faint pinstripes, polished patent leather shoes, and his signature bow tie, angled just so. I had long given up trying to match his flair, and instead contented myself with a sturdy tweed jacket and a wool scarf. It seemed only fair that at least one of us looked as though he might belong in the English countryside. As we approached the great oak doors, they were opened not by a footman, but by a woman whose bearing was sharper than her silhouette, tall, thin, dressed in dove grey, and with a jawline that suggested generations of inherited disappointment. Honoria Morecombe, she announced, as though we'd asked. You must be Monsieur Poirot. And Hastings, I supplied, bowing slightly. Indeed. Do come in. Lord Shelbrooke is expecting you in the drawing-room. The house had the chill of old money, rooms too vast to heat properly, and portraits too stern to smile down upon you. We were led past parlours and libraries, the hush of the house broken only by the occasional squeak of a servant's shoe on the polished floorboards. I do not like this house, Hastings, Poirot murmured, once we were alone. It is too quiet, too poised, like a hostess who smiles over a dinner party that is about to go dreadfully wrong. Inside the drawing-room, Edmund Shelbrooke stood by the window, his figure silhouetted against the grey landscape. He turned quickly as we entered, his face drawn but grateful. Monsieur Poirot, thank you, I didn't know where else to turn. Poirot gave a small bow. You did quite rightly, Lord Shelbrooke. Now, let us speak of Mademoiselle Charlotte. You shall tell me everything, from the beginning. I suppose, Shelbrooke began after Poirot had settled into the armchair opposite him. You've already heard the broad strokes. That Charlotte vanished, that she left no note, that no one saw her go. Oui, Poirot said gently. But it is often within the broad strokes, Lord Shelbrooke, that the brush has missed a corner of the canvas. Let us paint the picture again, with care. The young man inhaled deeply and leaned forward, hands clasped tightly. The morning of the wedding, Charlotte was Well, she was quiet. Not nervous, not particularly joyful, just thoughtful. I saw her around 10 before the guests began arriving. We took a brief walk in the rose garden. She seemed distracted but said nothing out of the ordinary. Poirot's eyes flickered with interest. Did she speak of the wedding? Of the future? She said she hoped it would be a calm day, that she disliked fuss, that everything was so much larger than her. I thought it was just nerves. And after that, she returned to her rooms with her maid, Alice. Around noon, Alice went to fetch a silver hairpin Charlotte had misplaced, one she insisted upon wearing. When she returned, Charlotte was gone. Her gown was still laid out, her shoes beside the bed. It made no sense. Poirot nodded. And you searched? Of course, everyone did. Servants, friends, my best man, dozens of people. We checked the chapel, the gardens, even the lake. But there was no trace. Poirot was silent a moment, then said softly, "You are very distressed, I can see that. But permit me a rather direct question, Lord Shelbrooke." "Of course." "Did Mademoiselle Charlotte love you?" Edmund blinked. "Yes, at least, I believed she did. She never said otherwise." Poirot folded his hands, eyes narrowing. "Très bien. We shall look then, not only for what is missing, but for what was concealed." And with that, he rose. "Let us begin this investigation properly, mon ami. Not with what they think happened, but with what no one dares to say aloud. Honoria Morecambe was not the sort of woman to lose control. That much was clear from the moment she ushered us into her morning room, where every cushion sat precisely, every porcelain figurine faced due north, and even the lilies in the vase looked as though they had signed a contract to remain perfectly upright. She sat like a marble statue upon an antique chair, long fingers laced over one another, a faint trace of lavender perfume clinging to the air around her. "Such a regrettable affair," she said, with a sigh so measured it might have been rehearsed. "Poor Charlotte. She's always had an imaginative streak." Even as a child, Poirot inclined his head. "But to disappear on the morning of her wedding, madame, voilà, that is no mere childhood fancy." "I don't suggest it was a prank, Monsieur Poirot, merely an emotional misjudgment. Charlotte has always been intense, passionate, a young woman of dramatic tendencies. She was fond of Lord Shelbrooke." Honoria's mouth twitched. She had been told that she should be. That peculiar phrasing caught my attention, though Poirot showed no visible reaction. "She had doubts, perhaps?" he asked delicately. Honoria waved a hand. Which young bride does not, especially when faced with the prospect of becoming Lady Shelbrooke? But no, there was no sign of rebellion. She said her vows would be her duty. "A curious word, duty," Poirot murmured. "Often the veil of other intentions." "I assure you," Honoria said, lips tightening, "Charlotte would not do anything to bring shame upon the family. If she ran, she will return. And if something else has happened, I trust you will uncover it swiftly." Poirot stood. "Indeed, madame, one always hopes the truth is as composed as those who fear it." As we left, I whispered, "You don't believe her, do you?" "Mon ami," Poirot replied, smoothing his cuffs. "When a woman speaks too calmly of chaos, one must wonder what storm she has already weathered or caused." Clara Finch greeted us in the drawing room, flustered and fluttering like a debutante who'd been handed a glass of sherry too strong for her nerves. She was a petite woman, perhaps in her late 20s, with curly chestnut hair and a mouth that couldn't quite keep secrets. "Oh, Monsieur Poirot, I just want to be helpful," she said, leading us to a pair of overstuffed chairs. "This has all been so dreadful. Charlotte was like a sister to me." "You have known her long?" Poirot asked, settling down. "Since school days, Cheltenham. She was always the clever one. Beautiful too, of course, and principled. Too principled sometimes. Ah? In what way? Well, Clara hesitated, twisting a handkerchief in her lap. She didn't like to be told what to do, especially by Lady Honoria. Charlotte despised being managed, as she called it. Poirot nodded. And the night before the wedding? Did you see her? Yes. I went to her room to wish her good night. She was writing something. A letter, I think. Very focused. She slipped it away quickly when I entered. Do you know to whom it was addressed? She bit her lip. Number, but she looked disturbed. Quietly so. As if she'd made up her mind about something. I didn't ask questions. And the letter? Vanished, she said. No one's found it since. Poirot steepled his fingers. Letters that vanish are like footsteps in the sand, Miss Finch. They tell us where someone was heading, before the sea of silence washed it all away. Clara blinked. That's very poetic. Poirot smiled. I try, mademoiselle. As we took our leave, she grasped my arm. You will find her, won't you? We shall do our utmost, I said, with what I hoped was reassuring firmness. Outside, Poirot whispered, A woman who envies is often more dangerous than one who hates. Did you observe how her voice trembled when she said, beautiful? I had, in fact, and found myself shivering despite the warmth of the hallway. We found Frederick Delaney by the stables, sleeves rolled to the elbow, a cigarette dangling from his lips. He looked every bit the brooding estate manager, sun-browned, broad-shouldered, and more comfortable among horses than people. I know why you're here, he said without preamble, and I didn't kill her, if that's what you're thinking. Poirot raised an eyebrow. Monsieur Delaney, we think nothing, yet. We seek only truth, and sometimes that truth begins in ash. Frederick turned away. You heard about the lace, I suppose. We did, I said. Burning a piece of the bride's lace in the fireplace on the morning she vanishes hardly looks innocent. He let out a long sigh. It wasn't what it looked like. Then perhaps you would be so kind as to explain, Poirot asked. Frederick reached into his pocket and produced a small charred scrap of ivory-coloured lace. She gave it to me. Charlotte, months ago, said it reminded her of something from school. A dressing gown, I think. A memory. We were close once. Poirot didn't blink. You were lovers? Frederick hesitated. It wasn't like that, not anymore, but there was something there, some history. And the lace. She said to burn it before the wedding. Said it belonged to the girl she used to be, and that girl had no place at the altar. I kept it until that morning. Then I followed her instructions. Poirot's voice softened. You honoured her request, but it makes you look guilty, n'est-ce pas? I know, but I'd rather look guilty than betray her trust. Poirot gave a small bow. Loyalty is a beautiful thing, Monsieur Delaney. But when it is buried in secrecy, it can also become a grave. As we walked away, I asked, You believe him? Poirot's eyes sparkled. Ah, Hastings. A man who burns the past does not always fear it. But let us see if this past, like the lace, was meant to disappear, or to reveal something beneath. Reverend Ambrose Halling lived in a stone cottage at the edge of the estate, framed by a collapsing garden and a crooked white gate that creaked ominously as we approached. He opened the door himself, a gaunt man with a face like wilted parchment and eyes that darted nervously between us and the sky, as if fearing divine lightning at any moment. Monsieur Poirot, he said breathlessly. Captain Hastings. I wasn't expecting, though of course I've heard. Do come in. The sitting room was sparse, with religious texts stacked haphazardly and a teacup resting, still full, beside a forgotten sermon. Poirot examined the room with his usual careful attention before turning his gaze upon the clergyman. Reverend, he said warmly, we are not here to condemn. We are only seekers of truth. And perhaps you, non? Perhaps you have heard something of it, whispered in the veil of confession. Reverend Halling shifted uneasily. I cannot betray confidences, Monsieur Poirot, but Charlotte did come to me, just 2 nights before the wedding. Was she distressed? I asked. He nodded slowly. Yes, deeply. She was afraid, though she would not say of whom. She said only that she had discovered something. Monstrous, I believe was her word. Poirot leaned forward. Did she give you any names? A clue? Even in passing? She mentioned a letter. Something she had received that changed her mind about the marriage, but she said it was too late. That duty must win out. Ah, Poirot exhaled. Such a word again. Duty. So many crimes are committed in its name. Reverend Halling's hands trembled. She did not seem as though she meant to flee. No, not Charlotte. But she did not want to go through with it. I believe she hoped someone else would stop the wedding for her. Poirot nodded solemnly. Merci, monsieur. You have been most helpful. As we stepped outside, the clouds hung low above the treetops. Poirot said quietly, There is guilt in that man, Hastings, but not of crime. He carries the burden of helplessness, a sin of inaction. I frowned. And this letter she mentioned, could it be the same one Clara saw? Just so, he said, eyes narrowing. Let us find this letter, mon ami, before someone ensures it is lost forever. Charlotte's dressing room had the eerie stillness of a theatre after the final curtain. The pale gold gown still hung on its rack, its silk gleaming faintly in the late afternoon light. Her shoes were tucked neatly beneath the chair, the bouquet still half wrapped in cellophane. It was all heartbreakingly untouched, as though time itself had frozen the room in its anticipation of vows never said. Poirot examined the space with the delicacy of a jeweller. He made no grand gestures, only quiet, deliberate steps. He tapped the floorboard with his toe, brushed dust from the edge of the writing desk, and finally stopped before the wardrobe. Do you see, Hastings? He said softly. This trunk here, regardez, locked, and yet the key is not among the lady's personal things. Curieux, n'est-ce pas? He produced a thin metal tool from his pocket. He always seemed to carry such devices, though he refused to call them lockpicks. And with the gentlest click, the trunk opened. Inside were old photographs, some sepia, some curled at the corners, and, near the bottom, a small navy blue diary with gold-trimmed pages. Poirot turned it over in his hands with reverence. This, he said, is no ordinary journal. Look here. Initials beside passages, small underlined phrases, even pressed petals. Emotional clues, Hastings. Memories. He flipped to a page marked with a ribbon. A sentence had been circled 3 times. I must not let them choose for me again. She was under pressure, I murmured. Oui? Said Poirot. From whom? That is the question. He closed the book carefully. We must now ask ourselves, what else has been hidden beneath silk and ceremony? The sun was beginning its slow descent when the discovery was made. It was a groundskeeper, young and shaken, who approached the manor breathlessly. By the lake, sir, he told one of the staff. Something floating near the reeds. I thought it was a bird, until I saw the lace. Within the hour, we stood by the water's edge. The lake was still, save for a faint ripple beneath the cattails. And there, tangled among the reeds, was a wedding veil. Charlotte's veil. Its lace edges were damp and stained, the satin weighed down by 2 small stones stitched into the hem. A deliberate sinking, Poirot murmured. It was meant to be found, but not immediately. Do you think she drowned? I asked, hesitantly. No, he said, shaking his head. Too symbolic. A drowning bride would not prepare lace with such care. Non. This is a message. A message! He crouched beside the water. Yes, Hastings. A statement. She wanted this found. She wanted someone to think she had drowned, but not convincingly enough to fool the police. Then what? Poirot rose, brushing his hands together. Then we must ask, not only who planted the veil, but why, and what they hoped it would stop us from discovering. He looked out across the lake, his eyes far away. She was clever, this bride, and she did not vanish. She moved, and now, mon ami, we must follow the trail she has left behind. It was over breakfast the following morning. Soft-boiled eggs and toast for me. A small dish of fruit and coffee for Poirot. That Lord Edmund Shelbrooke was summoned once again. He arrived somewhat improved in appearance, though the shadows under his eyes hinted at a sleepless night. Poirot gestured for him to sit. Merci for joining us again so early, my lord. There is something of importance I wish to ask. I'll help in any way I can, said Edmund, folding his hands. Poirot's gaze was keen. You told us Charlotte left no note, that no one saw her depart. Yet yesterday, you said something rather curious, that she had told you, and I quote, she couldn't live with the lie. Edmund blinked. Did I say that? You did, said Poirot gently. But how could you know she said such a thing after she vanished, if no one has spoken to her since? There was a long pause. Edmund glanced toward the window. I misspoke. It was something she said before the wedding, a few days before. Poirot leaned forward. But you did not mention it when we first spoke. It didn't seem relevant. On the contrary, said Poirot, his voice low, every truth concealed becomes very relevant. Edmund's fingers twitched on the tablecloth. Fine. She did say something similar. I pressed her, about the wedding, about the future, and she said there were things she wasn't sure she could live with. I thought she meant cold feet, or... He trailed off. Or a secret, I said quietly. He didn't deny it. Poirot nodded. Très bien. The truth, it peeks out like a ribbon from a closed drawer. And now, mon ami, I must follow that ribbon to see what it is tied to. Clara Finch looked as though she hadn't slept either. Her complexion, usually fair and flushed with youth, had faded into a kind of ghostly pallor. We found her in the music room. Pretending to polish a flute she clearly had no intention of playing. Miss Finch, Poirot began softly, I would like to ask you again about the letter you saw Charlotte writing. I've told you everything I know, she replied. She hid it. I didn't read it. No, mademoiselle, said Poirot with a light smile. Today I ask about another letter entirely. She turned slowly. I don't understand. Poirot folded his arms. Charlotte received an anonymous letter shortly before her disappearance. A letter, we believe, that warned her not to marry Lord Shelbrooke. A letter from someone with both concern and knowledge. That letter, Miss Finch. Did you write it? Clara's hands trembled. She set the flute down with a soft clink. Yes, she whispered. I did. I admit, even I was surprised. Ah, Poirot said, but not in triumph. His voice was gentle. Tell us why. I saw how unhappy she was, Clara said, eyes glistening, and I knew she'd never admit it. She felt bound by expectation, by her stepmother's pressure, by the estate's finances. She always did what was expected of her. I thought, if I sent the letter anonymously, she might finally make a choice for herself. You suspected Lord Shelbrooke of something? Clara hesitated. I didn't know anything, but I felt something. He always seemed too eager, too calculated. Charlotte was a prize to him, not a person. Poirot nodded slowly. And the letter? Do you recall the wording? I told her not to marry him, that she didn't know everything, that she still had a chance. Poirot's gaze sharpened. But then you let it go. I thought I'd done my part, she murmured. Poirot offered a slight bow. You may have done more than you think, mademoiselle. It was mid-afternoon when Poirot asked to revisit the main house's guest wing. Lord Shelbrooke stayed here the night before the wedding, n'est-ce pas? He asked the butler, who nodded and unlocked the door to a well-appointed room with heavy drapes and a still-scented fireplace. Poirot moved at once to the hearth. You see, Hastings, he said, kneeling beside the grate. Many things burn quickly, letters most of all. But sometimes a corner resists, especially when someone burns in haste. He used silver tweezers to extract a curled scrap from behind the grate. I crouched beside him, peering at it. Looks like part of a letter, I said. What's left of it, anyway? The corner was blackened, but a few words remained. Don't marry him. You don't know the truth. G.A. Poirot rose slowly, eyes glittering. Voilà. It is as I suspected. G.E., I asked. A name? Perhaps, or initials. But one thing is certain, Hastings. This letter was not destroyed by accident. You think Edmund burned it. I do not think, mon ami, I know. It was in his fireplace, and he alone had the means and motive to remove it from Charlotte's sight. Which means she saw it, I said. Perhaps. Or perhaps she only suspected it existed. But now we must ask. Who is G.E.? And what does she, or he, know that Charlotte did not? Poirot looked down at the charred scrap, as though it might still whisper its secrets. We are surrounded by polite lies, Hastings, but the truth, it smoulders. And like this paper, it is only a matter of time before it ignites. Frederick Delaney was not an easy man to catch standing still. We found him again by the stables, his sleeves rolled up, brushing down a mare as if the rhythm of the bristles might scrub away his thoughts. He didn't look up as we approached. I wondered when you'd come back, he said, without turning. Poirot folded his hands behind his back. You are a man who keeps many things inside, Monsieur Delaney, but perhaps today is the day to let one of them out. Frederick gave a dry laugh. You think I had something to do with her vanishing? I think, Poirot replied softly, that you are the only person who truly saw her, and perhaps the only one who let her go. Frederick stopped brushing the horse and leaned on the rail. For a long moment, he said nothing. I loved her, he said finally. I never stopped, not even after she broke it off. After her stepmother pushed her towards Shelbrooke. I thought it was over. But about a month ago, she came to see me, late, said she couldn't sleep, said she was scared. Of what? Of marrying someone she didn't trust, of giving up her freedom. She asked me what I would do if she disappeared. Poirot's brow arched. Disappeared? I told her I'd come looking for her. And yet, Poirot said gently, you did not. She made me promise I wouldn't. Said if she ever vanished, I was to let her go, that it would mean she was doing what she had to. Poirot was silent for a moment. Then he said, you honoured that, even when it hurt. Frederick nodded. She wasn't scared of Shelbrooke in a physical way. It was something else, something she knew, something she'd discovered. Poirot's eyes narrowed. You do not know what it was? Number. But she said it would ruin everything if it came out. Poirot nodded slowly. Merci, monsieur. You have told me enough. As we walked away, I whispered, do you believe him? Poirot's eyes were thoughtful. He let go, Hastings. Most lovers would not. But there is one truth in love. Sometimes the greatest act of devotion is walking away. Later that day, we returned once more to the modest cottage of Reverend Halling. He answered the door with less surprise this time, his demeanour more resigned than before. Back again, Monsieur Poirot, he said, leading us inside. I assume you've uncovered more troubling things. As always, Reverend, Poirot said with a faint bow. The trouble lies in what is hidden, not in what is found. We took our seats, the same faint scent of paper and tea clinging to the air. Reverend, Poirot began, I must ask again about Mademoiselle Charlotte. The nature of her visit. You said she was frightened, that she hoped someone else would stop the wedding. Yes, Halling said quietly. She didn't use those exact words, but it was implied. She kept saying, I can't say it out loud, but I can't lie to myself either. And yet, Poirot said, she did not cancel the wedding. She felt trapped, Halling said, his voice heavy. She believed calling it off would destroy her family, that the marriage was needed, for the estate, for appearances. She was doing it for others, not herself. Poirot's moustache twitched. Oui, again, the word returns, duty. I tried to convince her, Halling said, but I'm not sure she came for guidance. I think she just needed to say it out loud, to confess it to someone who wouldn't try to stop her. And yet she did disappear, I pointed out. Halling nodded, which means, I suppose, that in the end, she chose herself. Poirot studied him closely. Reverend, if you knew she might not go through with it, why did you not tell the family? I didn't think she'd do anything so dramatic, and she didn't strike me as someone plotting an escape. I thought perhaps she'd go through with it anyway. That was the last time I saw her. Poirot stood. You have been most kind. As we exited, I said, so he knew she might run, and still said nothing. To confess a fear is not the same as preventing it, Poirot replied. He hoped she would choose peace, but perhaps what she chose was freedom. As we left the Reverend's cottage and made our way back toward the manor, I found myself increasingly out of sorts. The countryside seemed suddenly oppressive, too still, too watchful. The manor's looming gables mocked me with their silence. It was all becoming too much. You know, Poirot, I said with a huff. I haven't the faintest idea what's going on anymore. Poirot turned his head slightly, not breaking stride. Ah bon? Speak, mon ami. You must expel the fog from your mind. Well, I began, throwing up a hand. Everyone says Charlotte was calm, and yet she clearly wasn't. She receives a mysterious letter signed by someone with initials we still can't trace. Clara sends an anonymous warning. Delaney says she planned to disappear. The Reverend says she wouldn't. Edmund claims he doesn't know anything, but then blurts out something he couldn't have known unless he'd seen her after she vanished. Poirot gave a small smile but remained silent. And then there's the veil in the lake. I mean, really, Poirot. Who plants a veil to fake a drowning? If she meant to disappear, why leave such a dramatic clue? And if someone else did it, why go through the trouble? Poirot tapped his walking stick thoughtfully on the path. You are asking many excellent questions, Hastings. Yes, but I'm not answering any of them. I feel like I'm chasing shadows. Poirot stopped and turned to me, eyes kind. That, mon ami, is because shadows are all we have, until we find the light source. What does that mean? He chuckled. Only that the truth is beginning to reveal itself. You are close, Hastings. Much closer than you think. I shook my head. Well, if I'm close, I certainly don't feel it. Poirot patted my arm. Take heart. Even the best detective needs the occasional guiding light. And that, mon cher, is what I am here for. I grunted. Yes, well, I hope your little grey cells are having better luck than mine. Oh, they are thriving, he said with a twinkle in his eye. Indeed, they are already beginning to dance. Back in the drawing room, Poirot paced slowly, hands behind his back, while I slumped into a deep leather chair, nursing my bruised confidence. The fire crackled, though the room remained stubbornly cold. Poirot, however, was unmistakably warming to his thoughts. "Hastings," he said suddenly, stopping mid-step, "tell me, what do you make of the veil in the lake?" I looked up. It was clearly planted, either by Charlotte to fake her own death, or by someone else to make it look like she drowned. Bien. And what is the difference between the two? One suggests she escaped. The other suggests someone wanted us to think she did. He resumed pacing. "Now let us consider the letter. The one from G.E. You think it's from a woman?" Poirot raised a finger. "Perhaps. Perhaps not. But let us assume for a moment that it was from a woman. One who knew something about Lord Shelbrooke. Something he desperately did not want Charlotte to know. A former lover? Exactement. Perhaps even a current wife." I sat bolt upright. "Wait, you think he was married?" "I think," Poirot said, his voice low and dramatic, "that Lord Edmund Shelbrooke is not only a man of secrets, but of sins. And if one such sin is bigamy, then we begin to understand everything." I stared at him. "That would explain why Charlotte ran." "Non, mon ami. It would explain why she hid. There is a difference. Running implies panic. Hiding implies strategy. And the veil? Left to delay us, to mislead. Then, Charlotte wanted to be found eventually." Poirot smiled. "Now you are thinking with the little grey cells." He tapped his temple. "Charlotte is clever, brave, but also bound by duty until that duty threatened to destroy her entirely. So she vanished, but not before leaving just enough behind to suggest another narrative." He looked at the fire. "And so we must now ask, who benefits from her silence? Who is made safe if she is never found?" I paused, thinking hard. "Shelbrooke." Poirot nodded. "And who is most frightened? Not by what Charlotte was, but by what she knew." "The person who fears her love," I murmured, recalling his earlier words. "Oui, Hastings, because love sees the truth, and the truth is what someone here has gone to great lengths to bury." He turned to me, eyes shining. "We are very near the end, mon ami, very near, but now we must be precise. A false accusation now would ruin everything. One must strike not with force, but with finesse." I blinked. "You mean to gather them?" Poirot smiled. "Indeed. It is time." He smoothed his waistcoat and walked calmly toward the bell pull. "The truth, Hastings, is like a wedding ring, often hidden, but never truly lost." It was evening by the time we approached the disused chapel on the north edge of the Morecambe estate, half consumed by ivy, with crooked stained-glass windows peering out like tired eyes. The sun had dipped below the tree line, casting long shadows across the stone, and the air grew still in the hush before revelation. Poirot moved with uncanny certainty, his patent shoes crunching softly against the moss-covered path. I followed closely behind, nerves tightening with each step. "Are you certain?" I whispered. Poirot gave me a look. "Mais oui, Hastings. Very certain. The dustless imprint of a missing box in the attic. The fond childhood memories of this chapel. The untouched dressing room, too perfect, too deliberate. She needed a place that was both hidden and familiar." He pressed gently on the warped wooden door, which creaked open under his touch. The scent of age and abandonment met us like a sigh. Inside, the space was dim, but not entirely dark. A faint flicker, candlelight, came from the upper level. We climbed the narrow staircase, Poirot silent, composed. At the top, a small loft space overlooked the sanctuary. There, on a simple wooden bench beside a dusty altar, sat Charlotte Morecambe. She was pale, her once glossy hair pulled back, her gown replaced by a simple sweater and skirt. And yet, despite the weariness in her features, she sat upright, calm, like a queen in exile. "I wondered when you'd come," she said quietly. Poirot bowed. "Mademoiselle, the veil in the lake was a fine touch, but not fine enough. She gave the faintest of smiles. I didn't want to disappear forever. Just long enough. Poirot stepped closer. Long enough for what? To stop it. To stop him. I found the letter from G.E. I knew it had to be true. Edmund was already married. He would have gone through with it anyway. But I wouldn't be his second deception. You hid, Poirot said gently, so you could later return with truth instead of scandal. She nodded. If I'd spoken out, no one would have believed me. They'd have called it cold feet or nerves. But vanishing, that got their attention. Poirot smiled. Très bien. You did not vanish in fear. You vanished in strategy. We returned to the manor just as darkness fully settled across the estate. Poirot wasted no time. He requested the presence of everyone in the drawing room, family, staff, and most significantly, Lord Edmund Shelbrooke. The groom-to-be entered with composed haste, still dressed impeccably despite the evening hour. He glanced around the room, confusion flickering across his features. "Why have we been summoned, Monsieur Poirot?" he asked stiffly. Poirot straightened his cuffs with deliberate elegance. "Because, monsieur," he began, "the bride has returned." There was an audible gasp. Clara, Honoria, even the Reverend stiffened in place. Edmund's expression was a masterpiece of disbelief and dread. "Returned," he echoed. "Indeed, and with her, the truth." Poirot stepped forward, addressing the room as only he could. Firm, theatrical, and precise. Lady Charlotte discovered, days before her wedding, a letter. It was from a woman you once married, monsieur. One Miss Genevieve Edwards. Edmund paled. "That's absurd." Poirot raised a hand. "Please, do not waste your breath. The letter you burned left enough behind to confirm it. Miss Edwards has been traced. She resides comfortably in Provence on a monthly allowance issued by a discreet legal trust. A trust, I might add, created under your father's name." Gasps again rippled through the room. Edmund swallowed. I was young. It was annulled." "Non!" Poirot snapped. "There was no annulment. And you knew it. That is why you silenced Miss Edwards. That is why you needed Charlotte. To restore your family's crumbling fortunes. To uphold appearances. To play your part." Poirot stepped closer. "But Charlotte was no pawn. She saw the truth and vanished so the world might see it too." Edmund sagged into a chair. "If she had only talked to me." "She tried," said Poirot coldly. "But liars do not hear the voices of the honest." The room fell silent. All eyes on the man who had nearly committed bigamy. And Poirot, at the centre, stood immovable. "Justice, monsieur," he said softly, "does not always come from the law. Sometimes it comes from a bride who refuses to say, 'I do.'" After the dramatic unmasking of Lord Edmund Shelbrooke, silence fell upon the drawing room like a heavy curtain. Emotions ran high, embarrassment, confusion, and in Honoria Morecambe's case, something close to rage. But Poirot, ever composed, merely cleared his throat and adjusted a cufflink with delicate precision. "If I may, mesdames et messieurs," he began, "I should like to explain how Hercule Poirot uncovered the truth. Not with violence or confrontation, but with the exercise of order and method, as always." He paced the room slowly, hands neatly clasped behind his back. "Let us begin, as always, with the facts. First," he said, "we have the matter of the dressing room. A room so meticulously untouched, so eerily perfect, it rang a silent alarm in my mind. Pourquoi? Because real vanishing leaves chaos. This room had none." He paused before the fireplace. "Second, the veil, discovered at the lake, delicately weighed down with stones. A theatrical gesture, oui, but not a convincing one. There was no sign of struggle, and no attempt to truly make us believe she had drowned. It was a breadcrumb, left deliberately. Poirot turned to Hastings and gave a slight nod. Then, of course, there was the dust. The attic chapel tower had not been used for years, but in one corner I observed an outline, clean, rectangular, as though a box had recently been moved. This place, Hastings, was both sacred to Charlotte and forgotten by all, the perfect hiding spot. He smiled modestly. I followed the psychology, not the footprints. A woman like Charlotte, sharp, proud, dutiful, would not run. She would plan, and in planning, she left behind clues not meant for the police, but for me. There was a pause. That, mes amis, is the method of Hercule Poirot, not to chase suspects in the dark, but to arrange the facts, observe the mind, and find the truth in what others overlook. He gave a small bow. Et voilà. The mystery is solved. That evening, as we took a slow walk along the garden path beneath the moonlit hedgerows, I could not help but feel strangely melancholic. The estate had quieted. Edmund had been escorted to London to face legal proceedings. Charlotte was safe. And yet, something lingered in the air. I say, Poirot, I mused. It's rather a sad ending, isn't it? No wedding, no joyous reunion, just a truth exposed, and a young woman hiding in a tower. Poirot twirled the end of his moustache thoughtfully. Ah, mon ami, that is where you are mistaken. Oh? You view the wedding as the ending. But in truth, the ending lies not in vows or ceremonies, but in what the heart chooses. Charlotte did not marry the wrong man. That, to me, is a most happy conclusion. I gave a small laugh. You're quite the philosopher. Poirot smiled. Sometimes, Hastings, marriage is not the solution. Sometimes the truest form of love is the love of oneself. He stopped to straighten a slightly tilted flower in the bed. And besides, he added with a twinkle, I have always preferred mysteries to matrimony. Far fewer compromises. It was precisely 1 week later when the letter arrived. I found Poirot seated in his chair, reading it with the faintest of smiles. The envelope was creamy and unadorned, save for a simple return address in Geneva. From Charlotte? I asked. He nodded. She is well, and she has made a decision. I sat down. What sort? She writes, Poirot read aloud. I have joined a women's legal society in Geneva, one that assists others in freeing themselves from obligations they did not choose. I have learned, Monsieur Poirot, that silence is a kind of prison. I intend to speak. I whistled. Quite something. Indeed, Poirot said. She has found her purpose. He folded the letter gently and returned it to the envelope. She thanks me, of course, he added. But she does not praise me. That, Hastings, is how I know she will succeed. And do you think she'll ever return to England? Poirot looked out of the window. Perhaps one day. But for now, she walks not down an aisle, but forward, into the life she has chosen. That, mon ami, is a path far more noble.